Hi, everybody. Welcome to part two of assessing and negotiating job offer. Part one, we covered different parts of the job offer that you might receive, and we discussed different ways that you might assess that job offer in identifying different things that you might be looking for in your career. Part two, we're going to be discussing that all important part of the interview, which is salary negotiation. Let's begin. So the first part of handling a negotiation effectively is really understanding and pushing beyond your barriers, the barriers that can stand in your way from effectively negotiating with your potential employer. Negotiation might seem like a scary term for some of us, may not feel comfortable, may not feel professional, but it is definitely a professional activity. It's definitely something that you can learn and that will really help you to earn what you feel you deserve for the positions that you're aiming for. Lack of self-confidence. Many of us feel that we may not be good enough for that position, that we may not be competitive enough, that we're just not going to handle the negotiation well. Identifying self-confidence as a barrier is, I think, one of the first steps to pushing beyond it. And the way to overcome that is to really identify your strengths, identify times when you have been able to effectively communicate and negotiate with other people, and apply that to this circumstance and realize that this is just another one of those moments where you can do well. A double bind. Some of us feel like there's a sort of pull between us wanting to be liked by others, but also wanting to show that we're competent. So on the one hand, we want to connect with that employer, want them to like us, want them to trust us. And so we might hesitate to negotiate because it may seem as though we're coming off as abrasive or overbearing or what have you. Whereas on the other side of the table, we might feel like we really want to show that we can negotiate well. We want to prove our muster and that we can win that employer over. So sometimes we have this feeling like we're in a double bind where we need to show that we're a competent professional. We know how to handle ourselves when having these kinds of conversations. And we also don't want to overstep our bounds, and we want to be this experience where we're building a relationship with an employer. Perceptions. We might believe that we're not competent enough to earn more. And this also aligns with self-confidence. We may believe that we just don't have what it takes to do well, that we are not competent or capable of handling more work or taking on additional responsibilities, or that we're worth the extra income that we deserve for the work that we do. It's important to recognize that those are perceptions. We want to go back to our accomplishments again and realize that we have been able to provide value to the teams that we've worked with and that we're capable and worthy of a higher income if that's what we're aiming for. There also might be biases that we experience that could shape those negotiations. We might be faced with assumptions that others might have about who we are in terms of our own personal identity, whether that be based off of our race, whether it's based off of our gender, or other factors about who we are and how we define ourselves and how we represent ourselves to other people. And those assumptions might influence the negotiation strategy. It might influence the successfulness within the negotiation experience, or those beliefs that those potential biases exist might also cause you to hesitate to negotiate. It's important to push beyond these biases, to recognize that no matter what your identity is, you're a capable person, and that you're going to provide value to their organization. So stand confident with those the ideas that you have about yourself. If you face any potential biases, it's important to figure out different ways to address them appropriately and professionally with that other person, so that those biases aren't what really rules that negotiation experience, and also, of course, your terms of employment with that company. So now that we've pushed beyond some of those barriers, let's discuss how you could overcome those barriers, but also at the end of the day, really prepare for that negotiation. So as I mentioned, the first step is really to address those potential barriers, figure out ways that we can overcome those challenges and think about how we're worth the extra income that we'd like to apply for. and that we can have this conversation with an employer about our salary and about our benefits. So number one, you need to evaluate your needs and your wants and start to outline your budget. You will not be able to have a strong position if you don't know what's important for you. So we discussed in our last video different components of a potential job offer. And one of the exercises as we closed that video was to evaluate for yourself what's important for you, what would you compromise, and so forth. So I would encourage you to envision the lifestyle that you plan to live. What's important for you? What's important for you now? What will be important for you in the future? If you're interested in having a house, if you want to live in the city, if you want to have multiple homes, if you want to have a car, if you want to have a family, these various things in our lives will cost money. And the thing that you can start to do now is to outline what those wants are, and you can then start to develop a budget through that. You can find that information online with respect to the costs of those different items and incorporate that into your budget, into your savings plan, and so forth. Once you evaluated those needs and those wants, that could be incorporated into how you frame your salary expectations, more so for yourself. But if you don't understand where you are coming from and what's important to you, then you may be willing to just accept anything. Assess your value. This is really core. You want to catalog those accomplishments of yours, identify your strengths, think about why you are the person to be hired for this job. At the end of the day and at the bottom line, this is what it's all about when it comes to being hired by an employer, and this is what they're thinking about. And so when you start to establish that for yourself, when you understand the needs of the businesses that you're aiming for, when you know where your strengths lie and how well you're going to be able to perform that job, then it will be a lot easier for you to put yourself in a position to showcase that you'd be the one who'd be able to earn a higher salary if that's what you're asking for, or receive particular benefits that you're looking for, because you want them to want to hire you, and they'll want to hire you because you're the right person for the job. If you don't start identifying those strengths and cataloging those accomplishments with real solid results, then you're not going to have a strong foundation for building a case as to why you're the right fit, as well as your stance with regards to your negotiation. Research the job. You know, this again goes hand in hand with assessing your value. You have to understand who this organization is. So understanding their needs will help you to build what your value is to this organization. But in addition to that, there are resources that help you to learn about what salary expectations you can aim for. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, or the BLS.gov, Glassdoor, Salary.com, the NACE Salary Calculator, Vault. These are all tremendous resources that you will have access to identify the salary expectations that you could aim for. You want to be thinking about a range. You want to sort of aim for a range that is going to be within the sort of normal scope of your level of experience and the industry that you're aiming for, the occupation that you're applying for, and so forth. And these resources will help you to get a good picture of what some would call the going rate would be for that occupation. Identify your target salary, your salary range, and your walkaway point. So what are you aiming for? This aligns with what the first bullet states about evaluating your needs. What would be the ideal? What would be the surrounding kind of range that you'd be willing to be willing to have wiggle room for, so you don't just ask for a certain dollar amount, such as 60K, 70K, and that's it. If you stick to that one point, then your walk-away point will be 70K. And if that employer doesn't offer it to you, you might just say, well, it's not the job for me. But if their salary range was maybe 55 to 65, and you'd be okay with accepting 65 for the position, then you might then come to an agreement as far as a salary that you'd be comfortable with. So think about what salary you're aiming for, what is your wiggle room, and what are you willing, what do you feel is just the bottom line for you? It's okay to have a bottom line. It's okay to have a walk away point. But if you don't know what that is in advance, you'll feel flustered when it comes to this process because you really won't know where you stand. Consider what the employer might say and how you might respond. Practicing is a really important part of any preparation for interviewing, and the same is true of negotiation. Anytime that you are communicating with other people, you really want to get comfortable having those discussions, and part of it is anticipating what that discussion might look like. What do you feel this employer might say? You can outline some particular responses that an employer might have, and then draft for yourself different ways that you might respond. These can be easy responses, these could be difficult responses, but if you anticipate what they might say, if you have an idea about how you might respond and start to practice that, maybe with a friend of yours or a colleague or a family member or a career counselor in our office, then it will make it so much easier and more comfortable when you're faced with those actual questions in the job interview and while you're negotiating with your employer. So practice and think about how that conversation will run its course. Practice with others. I think it goes without saying, but the more you practice, the more comfortable you'll be with this process. So the negotiation strategy is to really be positive about this process, be flexible. You don't want to go in thinking that you're going to lose or that you're going to win the employer over. You don't need to go into this discussion with the guards on or the shields up. It's about relationship building. So if you go in there with a positive attitude, feeling confident that you can have this kind of conversation, even if it doesn't go exactly as you expect, or you don't receive the salary that you might want, if you're flexible, if you understand that this whole process is a learning experience for you and an experience for them to get to know who you are and evaluate your candidacy, then it will be a lot easier as you approach the job interview and as you have these conversations related to salary. Approach the situation as a conversation, not a confrontation. So again, it just sort of underlines the point that I've just stated. If you go in there with this confrontational attitude, the employer might get turned off, or you could feel nervous about it, feeling like I'm just not going to be able to go in with a strong enough attitude. And the reality is you don't necessarily need to have that kind of perspective. If you go in there with a conversational mindset, thinking that you're going to sort of discuss this role, discuss your candidacy, discuss your value, then the discussion should go a lot smoother. You want to deflect the salary discussion until you have an offer. You don't want to react right away if an employer is asking you as one of the first questions in the interview what your salary expectations are. So as often as you can, you really do want to try to deflect that salary discussion until you have the offer. An important component to this process is establishing your candidacy. If you haven't had a chance to establish that candidacy, starting with the salary discussion first is going to focus the attention around salary. And then it's all about just how much you're willing to take or not. So if you start to establish why you're the right value for their company, why you'd be able to provide value to their organization and handle what they would like you to do, then you can start to explain why you're, should be earning what you expect. You don't want to overshare. So in the last slide, I did talk about, really establishing and understanding what your walkaway point is and what your standpoint is in terms of what you need and what you want. But these are things that the employer does not need to know. It's all about your candidacy. It is not about why you need this amount of money or why it would be so important for you to earn those particular benefits. It's not really critical for the employer to understand where you're coming from. Oversharing is going to diffuse the discussion. It's going to confuse you. It's going to confuse the employer, and it might put you in the wrong stance. Just avoid oversharing and explaining why you might need this sort of arrangement. it's again best to showcase you're the right fit, you have the skills, you have the attitude, you have the professional sort of behavior that they're looking for. That's really where you want to focus your attention. And again, focus your value on the company. This is really this core of your conversation. You should earn this amount because you're going to be able to do X, Y, and Z if they hire you. Provide examples, showcase what you may have done in past employers, showcase your knowledge about what their needs are, and this is what's going to help the employer understand that you really are the right fit and you're worth investing in. And also understand the recruiter and the hiring manager's positions. You know, they also are in their own roles. If they do need to go back to human resources or their managers to explain why you would be earning a higher salary point, then you should understand that. You could even express that. This is a moment for you also to learn, you know, if you want to share that, you know, if they need some assistance in the process, or if they could explain a little bit about what might be a block or a barrier for them in terms of offering you a higher salary. You shouldn't feel uncomfortable to have those kinds of questions, because really the whole process is for you to learn and be curious and kind of learn more about the process of how the organization works. So this is a role-playing exercise. This is normally done, of course, when we have a live event, but this is something that I will encourage you to do on your own with a partner, to divide into pairs. So one person would be the employer, the other person would be the job candidate. One person can take on the role of the employer, the other person will take on the role of the candidate. Now, this is going to take a little bit of explanation, but there is a great salary tool, and I'm going to provide you with the resources in a slide or two after this, which has a workbook, and the pages that are referenced in this slideshow refer to those specific questions. Pages. So there are question prompts. If you recall, in a few slides back, I mentioned that you should anticipate particular employers' questions, statements, responses, and so forth. So start to practice that with someone else through this role-playing exercise, so that you just get used to the process of having this kind of conversation. So here we will come to a close. I hope that this has given you at least some foundational tools that you can use now to start to prepare for salary negotiating. And these resources are good, not just for salary negotiation, but also for all of the other parts of this entire workshop, including part one. So what I mentioned earlier in the last slide with that workbook, the AAUW, which is the American Association of University Women, have a wonderful course that you could take for free titled Work Smart and Start Smart Salary Negotiation, and that's the URL. The Employee Retirement Income Security Act, or ERISA, is the federal law that governs retirement plan structures in the United States. So if you want to learn more about those regulations, you can go there. For more information about healthcare and healthcare plans and insurance, healthcare.gov is a wonderful website to learn more about this. There's a wonderful video linked here titled How to Negotiate Your Job Offer with Professor Deepak Malhotra at Harvard Business School. Wonderful explanation of how to formulate those relationships and to confidently go into those discussions about salary and job offers. The New York City Consumer and Worker Protection Agency, this is provided so that you are also aware of the regulations related to employment opportunities and job offers and so forth. So check out their website for things that you should be aware of. The Department of Labor, New York State Department of Labor, also provides information about various guidelines related to employment. There's also a New York State salary history ban, which went into law only a few years ago. Important to be aware of that, important to make sure that employers are not asking for your salary history as part of your job application process. You can find out more details of the law there on newyork.ny.gov. The IRS, going back to retirement plans, the IRS provides a lot of detailed information related to related to taxes and retirement plans. So be sure to be aware of those regulations so that as you are reviewing those retirement packages, you're more familiar with what that terminology is all about and what the tax-related issues may be. The New York State, the U.S. Department of Labor also has a lot of information about health plans and benefits. And finally, the Department of Labor also provides information related to retirement plans. So that is the end of our video. I really do hope that this was useful for you. If you need assistance, you're welcome to reach out to us at Career Development Services for any questions, or if you need help to practice negotiation skills or accepting the job offer, reach out to us, and we're happy to help our Hunter students and alumni throughout this process. Have a wonderful day. Thank you again. And I hope folks